I'm going to tell you a story about stories. So, when I was a very little girl, I learned a skill that I believe has given me the greatest and most sustained joy of my life. Peering over my older sister's shoulders, I learned how to read long before I was officially taught at school. And, you know, I think Noddy was my first book friend. And he came to us in these wonderful hardbound books that my sister used to borrow from the nearby lending library. And as you can see, he was so strange and unfamiliar. And yet, something about Noddy, his frailty, his creativity, was very much something I could identify with even in my little life. And from then on, I was hooked to books. You know, I was always reading. My mother had to drag me out from under a bed clutching a book so that I could do my daily duties around the house. You know, there was really no looking back at all. And even till this day, I read 3 or 4 books at any given time. Now, I hope that all of you in the audience find this story resonating with you. Even though you all are young and notwithstanding the lure of computer games, I hope that many of you curled up with a good book when you were younger. I hope you winged away to imaginary lands. I hope you lived vicariously through the lives of many characters, heroes, and I hope some worthy villains as well. And I hope you felt that perhaps when you grew up, you would write a great book too. Now, it was many decades later that I realized how much that kind of childhood that hopefully you and certainly I had was a privilege, and how fortunate we have been. For the last more than 12 years now, I have been deeply involved with the not-for-profit sector in India. And in the early years with the network Pratham, which works to put every child in school and learning well. Now, through that network, tens of thousands of children in every part of the country were helped to learn how to read, that very basic skill, how to read. And then it was soon understood very quickly that these children had very little to practice their newly learned reading skills with. There were no books anywhere. They were first-generation learners. Their parents probably didn't know how to read. And the only thing they had around them to read was probably their school textbooks. And have you tried curling up with one of those? So this was the problem. And clearly, this was something that needed to be addressed. Now, you know, in India, the numbers are always so staggering. We've heard some talks earlier too. So let's look at this. You know, we are a very young nation, and there are 300 million children who need good books year on year on year. Books get devoured easily. More have to be produced all the time. And look at that. There are only 25,000 books that are created. We think the data is not so great, but we think every year. And most of those books are created in only 2 languages, English and Hindi, in a country where the language probably changes and certainly the dialects do every 100 kilometers. So let's take a comparison. Look at the United Kingdom. They have a child population of about 12 million. They produce 72,000 books every year for those children, which means they have 6 books for every child. And look at India. 1 book has to be shared maybe between 20 children if those children can get that book. There are many great publishers and fantastic books in India, but unfortunately they don't have the reach. The books don't get to where the bulk of the children are. So some of us decided, as Mr. Arunachalam told us earlier, we had a good meaty problem. And we said, can we do something about this? So Pratham Books was set up on a cold morning, January 1, 2004, with a bold vision, a book in every child's hand. And we promised ourselves that what we would do would be to try and create the best possible content of the highest quality. We would try to produce it in as many Indian languages as was possible, that we would try to have as much local and relevant content, not necessarily just the Noddies, local and relevant content, and that we would put it out at the lowest and most attractive price possible. That was the task we set up for ourselves. Now that's of course easier said than done, We were complete novices at the art of publishing when we had to learn pretty quickly, and one thing became extremely clear very quickly. We could not do this in a business as usual format. If we are talking of reaching millions of children, we can't go the retail model, we can't go the usual way. We have to break open that model. And we would have to innovate, we would have to catalyze the ecosystem itself. Because Pratham Books has never thought that this is about us. No one entity can take on a job like this. So it meant that we would have to partner, we would have to collaborate, we'd have to influence, and most of all, we would have to do disruptive innovation. One of the things, because we were a non-profit, we didn't have to get cramped by the idea of financial sustainability. Now, in a world where markets seem to be the solution for almost everything, even friendship, as you can see, I'm a little older than some of you. It seems old-fashioned to think that it need not just be markets. I think the big social problems of the world have never been solved by any one narrow model. So we set ourselves up with some philanthropic capital. A lot of generous people do work with us. I myself fund the foundation every year. And we have roped in so many volunteers, so many publishers, so many writers, illustrators, in-house and outside, that give us of their time and talent. Because after all, this is a societal mission, and everyone will have to join in if we are going to make sure that there is a book in every child's hand. So we said we are going to innovate, we are going to ride every distribution channel that we can find. And we've, like the research and development labs that we heard about, we've really tried a lot of unorthodox stuff. For instance, there used to be the Unilever Shakti Ammas who used to go door to door selling fair and lovely sachets. And we took our books out with them, and that worked very well for a while. People who were selling solar lanterns carried our books, and when the man used to come into the village, the children used to come running out, say, where are the books? We've tried working closely with governments. The government of Bihar helped us to put our books into every one of the 72,000 schools in that one of India's most poor states. And those books are still there. We found they survived the floods because they are laminated, and they're one of the few things that survived when there was a disastrous flood a couple of years ago. We've worked with railway stations and post offices, and we've tried every kind of thing that we could do to see that we open up that model, we do disruptive innovation. So what's happened? What's the result? Pratham Books in the last 8 years has produced 245 original titles, which means 1,573 books because of the many languages that we have produced in. It means that we have 10.3 million books out there in the hands of children. It means that there are 10 million story cards, which is an innovation. We have a little sachet book, which is just that small, and which price of it goes down to almost 2 rupees. And I tell you, even in the poorer pockets of India, little children always have a little 1 or 2 rupee coin jingling in their pockets, and suddenly something like this puts a real experience of a story right in their hands. And because our books go so much into many shared sittings, we believe that we have had a readership of about 25 million children so far. You know, it's just amazing to watch the experience of a young child who gets her first book. I've seen many times, they just first clutch it and hold it because it's such a novel experience. Really, this is for me? And once when I was in North Karnataka in a small town where a school had been set up for the children of nomadic soothsayers who had never stayed in one place before, and a school had been set up, we'd helped to set up a library there. I'll never forget this young kid. He was about 9 and had just learned how to read. And he read out one of our Kannada books in front of the whole class, and he did it very well, and we all clapped. And he said, "No, wait, I'm going to read it to you again because I've learned English now." And so he read it out to us again in English. I think that's the power of a great story. It energizes you to learn something more. It hooks you and you want to do more of the same. So that's the kind of sense of shared achievement that we do have. But as I said before, there's always in India more of a challenge. We still have so many more children to reach, and we can't do it alone. So we have to think differently and leverage, leverage, leverage. We need more books, more languages, but to do that we also need a platform which is open and on which other people can build. So, CC, I don't know how many of you have seen that logo before. We have put around 300 of our books out into the Creative Commons. I assume you people know that the Creative Commons is a way to, allow human knowledge to be created and to be shared without proprietary walls, without copyright, without patents. And our books on the Creative Commons can be read online, they can be shared, they can be printed, they can be distributed. Children can get them in many ways. So you can share our stories. Increasingly, India is getting connected. There's broadband, there's mobiles, you can get our books on the phone, you can put them on your computers, and then you can share them, even where children don't have so much access. And you'll be surprised at the response. Our books online have been read 500,000 times. Our texts and our pages have been looked at more than 2 lakh times. On Facebook, on Twitter, on Scribd, on Flickr, we have lots of followers who feel that they can be part of something like this. And the great power of creative collaboration. So people from around the world take our books and translate them. So we've had translations in French, in Spanish, in German, Assamese, and even something we never knew about, which is an internet language called Lojban. There's also the power of collaborative creation, which means we put out our text and our visuals on the Creative Commons, and we encourage people to remix and retell those stories. So one story creates another so many stories, and you can read any version of that. So it's creative collaboration and collaborative creation, and I think that's the way to go when we're looking at a problem as large as the one we're talking about here, and some of the others that you have been hearing all day long. So this is the theme, collaborate, collaborate, because after all, if we decide that in India all children must be reading and that all children therefore must have great books to read, then everyone should be able to be part of this and do something about it, whether you're a parent, whether you're a printer, whether you're the government, whether you're a corporation, or whether you're just a neighbor or a friend. And so we decided, let's test this out. In addition to all the other things that we do, we have a wonderful team of very enthusiastic people who keep trying new things. We decided that last September, on International Literacy Day, how about we say, let's put out one book on that one day and see can some people volunteer around the country in every single state to share it with children who would otherwise not have had a good book to read. Let's see the results. Sushila's Columns is a delightful story about a young girl who keeps drawing rangoli-like designs all over the place. And when we put this out, the results were stupendous. Our online communities created an offline store. Our book was printed in only 5 languages. It was read out in 9 languages, including sign language. There were 419 storytellings. Almost 20,000 children in that one day got to share that book. Every single state responded, 28 states and 2 union territories. Children all over the country got to read and learn about Sushila and her columns. That, I think, is the power of the collective. That's how we can all come together. There are so many problems in India, but so many million diverse ways to actually cut through barriers and make each one of us part of the solution, not part of the problem. And I believe that children, the future of India's children, depends on, of course, on many things. It depends on their access to safe water, to good food, to critical health care, to a good education. But just like all of us experienced, that future also depends on a child getting a great book in her hand to give wings to her imagination. Because at a time when knowledge is power and where creativity can mean freedom, that child deserves that opportunity to cut out of the reality of her daily life. So here's what I think. I think all of us can do something. So I would suggest go out there, get a book, not just ours, anyone's. Find the child who deserves the joy of reading it. Let's put a book in every child's hand. And I'll tell you one thing, I promise you one thing. The joy will belong as much to you as to her. You are TED people, you can do it. Thank you very much and namaste.